Every time a rocket leaves the ground, there are people cheering, flags, countdown clocks, families crying happy tears, commentators losing their voices, and somewhere inside all that celebration, if you know where to look, there is a silence, a wait, a list of names that nobody reads at the press conference. Space travel has claimed 19 lives in flight. Count the training accidents, the ground explosions, the unnamed workers whose deaths were classified by governments and buried in state archives, and the number climbs well past 100. These are some of their stories. And more importantly, these are the things that exist today because they died. This is not a tragedy reel. This is a record of the people whose deaths built the machines that keep astronauts alive right now. Let's start with a name almost nobody knows. Valentin Bondarenko, 24 years old, a Soviet cosmonaut trainee, selected in the same original group as Yuri Gagarin himself. March 23, 1961. Less than 3 weeks before Gagarin would become the first human in space, Bondarenko was completing a 10-day endurance test inside a pressurized isolation chamber filled with pure oxygen. He removed a medical sensor from his skin, wiped the adhesive with an alcohol-soaked cotton swab, tossed it aside without thinking. It landed on a hot plate. In a pure oxygen environment, everything ignites. His suit caught first. The chamber followed. By the time technicians could depressurize the door, he had third-degree burns across nearly his entire body. He died 8 hours later. The Soviet government erased him. His name disappeared from official records and photographs. His family was told to stay quiet. The world would not learn Valentin Bondarenko had existed until 1986. 25 years after his death. And here's why that silence mattered beyond one family's grief. The lesson his death should have taught, that a pure oxygen atmosphere turns a sealed chamber into a bomb, never crossed borders. It never reached the engineers who needed to hear it, because it was covered up. 4 years later, 3 American astronauts would die for exactly the same reason. January 27, 1967. Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee. Grissom was NASA's most experienced active astronaut. 2 space flights, Mercury and Gemini. He was a frontrunner to command the first moon landing. Ed White had been the first American to walk in space in 1965, floating outside his Gemini capsule for 23 minutes, loving every second of it, until Mission Control had to order him back inside. Roger Chaffee was 31, a naval aviator. This was going to be his first time in space. He had spent years preparing for the moment he finally would. On the evening of January 27th, all 3 were sealed inside the Apollo 1 command module at Launch Complex 34, Cape Kennedy. They were not launching that day. It was a ground test, a countdown simulation. Routine. The capsule was pressurized with pure oxygen. The same decision nobody had questioned because it had always been done that way. At 6:31 in the evening, a spark ignited beneath Grissom's seat. Nylon burned, Velcro burned, foam padding that would barely smolder in normal air detonated in pure oxygen. The fire spread in seconds. Ed White tried to open a hatch. 6 bolts, ratcheted one at a time from the inside, 90 seconds under normal conditions. With internal pressure rising and smoke filling the cabin, it was impossible. The hatch was engineered to prevent accidental opening in space. That night, it sealed 3 men inside. Roger Chaffee's voice came through the radio. Then silence. 27 technicians rushed toward the capsule. They were driven back by heat and smoke so thick they couldn't see. When they finally opened the hatch, 5 minutes after the first call, all 3 men were dead. The investigation afterward identified over 1,400 individual safety defects in the Apollo spacecraft. The flammable materials, the wiring, the hatch design, the atmosphere. The contractor that built the capsule had known about many of them. NASA had known about some. Grissom himself had been so frustrated with the spacecraft quality that his crew had once posed for a mock prayer portrait, heads bowed, hands clasped, and mailed it to the program manager. The inscription read, "It isn't that we don't trust you, Joe, but this time we decided to go over your head." He was joking. Then he was gone. NASA shut down crewed Apollo flights for 20 months. They rebuilt the capsule from the inside out. quick-release hatch that opens in seconds, fireproof interior materials, mixed gas atmosphere during ground operations. Every single safety feature that now protects crews launching on Orion traces a direct line back to what happened at Pad 34. Launch Complex 34 was decommissioned after Apollo ended. It still stands today, rusting, overgrown, silent. A faded sign reads abandoned in place. 3 granite benches sit at the base, one for each man. Every January, their families go back to lay flowers. April 24th, 1967. 3 months after Apollo 1, Vladimir Komarov became the first person to die during an actual space mission. His Soyuz 1 spacecraft had been launched despite more than 200 documented technical problems. Political pressure from Soviet leadership demanded a spectacular flight to mark a national celebration. Engineers warned the vehicle was not ready. They were overruled. One solar panel failed to deploy after reaching orbit. The attitude control system malfunctioned. The spacecraft began tumbling. Komarov fought it for over a day. He barely managed to align it for re-entry. Then the parachute failed. The main chute container had been manufactured with walls that were too rough, coated in a substance that should have been smooth. The line snagged during deployment. The backup chute tangled with the partially deployed main. Soyuz 1 hit the ground at roughly 40 meters per second. When the recovery team arrived, they found a charred mass. Komarov's remains were barely identifiable. What makes this story almost unbearable is this. He knew his close friend Yuri Gagarin had tried to replace him on the flight, reasoning that Soviet leadership would never risk Gagarin's life and would cancel the mission entirely. The plan failed. When colleagues asked Komarov why he didn't simply refuse, his answer was simple and devastating. If he refused, Gagarin would fly in his place. He would not let his friend die for him. So Vladimir Komarov climbed into a spacecraft he knew was broken. He spent 27 hours fighting it through orbit, and when the parachute line snagged, he fell. Yuri Gagarin died 11 months later in a jet crash. He was 34 years old. The Soyuz was completely rebuilt after Komarov. Quality control overhauled. The parachute system redesigned from scratch. Soyuz went on to become one of the most reliable crew vehicles in human history, carrying astronauts to the International Space Station continuously for over 4 decades. June 30th, 1971. Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, Viktor Patsayev. They were coming home. 22 days aboard Salyut 1, the world's first space station. Every human endurance record broken. The Soviet Union had a hero's welcome waiting. During descent, a pressure equalization valve opened prematurely. At 168 kilometers altitude, still in a vacuum of space, the air inside the cabin began bleeding out. They were not wearing pressure suits. The Soyuz capsule had been designed to carry 3 cosmonauts, but 3 suited men couldn't fit. So the decision had been made, a known compromise, a weight-saving gamble, to fly without suits. The valve was hidden beneath their seats. Evidence suggests they tried to locate and close it manually. Under ideal conditions, this would have taken several minutes. They had less than 1 minute. Within 30 seconds of the valve opening, the cabin pressure dropped to near vacuum. They lost consciousness. Within 2 minutes, all 3 were dead. The capsule continued its automatic descent. The parachute deployed perfectly. It landed softly in Kazakhstan, exactly as planned. When the recovery team opened the hatch expecting 3 triumphant space explorers, they found 3 men still strapped in their seats, blue-faced, silent. The Soviet space program halted for 2 full years. When flights resumed, cosmonauts wore pressure suits during launch and re-entry. Always, no exceptions. The Soyuz was redesigned to carry only 2 crew members, creating enough room for both to wear full suits. That requirement, pressure suits during ascent and re-entry, applies to every crewed spacecraft operating today, including Orion. The suits the Artemis crew where exists in direct lineage from the night a valve the size of a coin opened above Kazakhstan, and 3 men silently ran out of air. January 28, 1986. 7 names: Francis Gabi, Michael Smith, Judith Resnick, Ellison Onizuka, Ronald McNair, Gregory Jarvis, Krista McAuliffe, a high school teacher from New Hampshire, chosen from over 11,000 applicants to be the first civilian in space. Millions of school children were watching live. 73 seconds after liftoff, Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart. A rubber O-ring seal in the right solid rocket booster had stiffened in the cold overnight temperatures. Hot combustion gas leaked through. The external fuel tank ignited. Engineers at the contractor had warned NASA the night before. They recommended delaying the launch. They were overruled. The investigation found something more disturbing than a technical failure. O-ring erosion had appeared on previous flights. Each flight that survived despite damaged seals made the damage look more acceptable. Each safe return normalized the risk a little further. Until the morning, it killed 7 people. This process had a name: normalization of deviance. It means you see a warning. The warning doesn't kill you. You accept it. You accept it again. Until one day you can't. NASA created an entirely new safety office, redesigned the boosters, required pressure suits during ascent and re-entry, something the shuttle program had abandoned to make spaceflight feel routine. It was never routine. It never will be. February 1st, 2003. 7 more names: Rick Husband, William McCool, Michael Anderson, David Brown, Kalpana Chawla, Laurel Clark, Elon Ramon, an Israeli fighter pilot and the first Israeli astronaut. During Columbia's launch 16 days earlier, a piece of foam had broken away from the external fuel tank and struck the leading edge of the left wing. Engineers noticed it. Some flagged concerns. Management concluded it was probably fine, because foam strikes had happened on previous flights without catastrophe. The same logic, the same normalization. 17 years later, during re-entry, superheated gas entered through the damaged wing. The internal structure melted. Columbia broke apart over Texas and Louisiana at 60 kilometers altitude. Over 82,000 pieces of debris fell across 2 states. The Accident Investigation Board's conclusion was damning. NASA had not learned from Challenger. The culture that redefined known risks as acceptable had survived 17 years and killed 7 more people. The shuttle program ended in 2011. In its place came the systems we use today. The Orion heat shield was specifically designed to avoid the tile vulnerability that destroyed Columbia. When Artemis I's uncrewed test flight in 2022 revealed unexpected erosion in the heat shield material, the program stopped. Engineers investigated. The re-entry trajectory was adjusted. The launch was delayed because they remembered. There are names most people will never hear. Theodore Freeman, killed in 1964 when a goose shattered his jet canopy during a routine training flight. Charles Bassett and Elliot C., the original Gemini 9 crew, killed in a jet crash in 1966. Clifton Williams, Robert Lawrence, the first African-American astronaut, both killed in aircraft accidents in 1967. Lawrence never made it to space. And the ones whose names governments deliberately erased. On October 24, 1960, an R-16 missile exploded at the Baikonur Cosmodrome during pre-launch testing. Approximately 120 people were killed: engineers, military personnel, technicians. The Soviet government classified the disaster for decades. These were not astronauts. They were the people who built the machines, fueled them, and tightened the bolts. Their deaths built every ground safety protocol, every fueling procedure, every blast radius calculation at every launch facility on Earth. Their names were taken from them, but their lessons survived. As of today, 791 people have traveled to space. 19 of them died doing it. If you count the training accidents, the ground explosions, the classified disasters, the number of human lives that paid for modern spaceflight exceeds 150. Every time a crew seals their hatch, they are sitting inside the accumulated lessons of every death that came before them. The quick-release hatch, Grissom, White, and Chafee. The pressure suits, Dobrovolsky, Volkov, and Patsayev. The booster standards, Scobie, Smith, Resnick, Onizuka, McNair, Jarvis, and McAuliffe. The heat shield protocols, Husband, McCool, Anderson, Brown, Chawla, Clark, and Ramon. Gus Grissom once said, after his first spaceflight, that if we die, he hoped people would accept it, that the conquest of space is worth the risk of life. Less than 2 years later, he was dead, but the program did not stop. It changed. It learned. It built safer machines and stronger cultures and better procedures. And because it changed, people are alive tonight who otherwise would not be. That is what these names bought. Every single one of them. If this video stayed with you, share it with one person who should hear it. These names deserve to be known beyond this screen. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because the next story we tell is one history buried even deeper than this one. And drop a comment with the name that hit you hardest. I read every single one.